A warm welcome from my side to our webinar today, What's New in ownCloud Server 10.4, which I will guide you through. Just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Patrick Meyer and I'm working for ownCloud as a product manager. I'm mainly responsible for the server side of ownCloud and the web interface. And yeah, I'm talking to customers, their wishes and feature requests, prioritizing them and creating the roadmap based on this. And of course, also working in strategy and some marketing tasks. So for our today's webinar, I have a quick overview for you. We're going to talk about the new server release. First, I will give you some general information. Then I will shed light on the two new shiny features that come with that server release. And afterwards, we will talk about some smaller changes. Those are more technical and yeah, interesting for supporting ownCloud. In the end, we will have a quick question and answers session. So if you have questions during the webinar, you can just enter them in the chat window, and in the end, I will try to answer all of them. So let's directly get into things. So ownCloud Server 10.4 has been released last week. As usual, we have release notes and a changelog. For those who are maybe new to ownCloud, the release notes usually have their focus on administrators. So they are written in a way that administrators can directly recognize what will change in terms also of configuration, for example. So it is recommended before upgrading ownCloud Server to always read the release notes and see what configuration options maybe need to be adjusted or infrastructure requirements need to be changed or respected before doing an upgrade. And apart from that, there's also the changelog, which is rather technical and contains every single change that has been done for the release. So generally speaking, and that's also important, especially if you're operating larger installations of ownCloud, if you're upgrading from the previous version, which is 10.3.2, to the new version, there are no database migrations. So the upgrade should rather be a short one and not take long times for migration. So with 10.4, we removed the support for PHP 7.0. That version of PHP is not supported by PHP itself anymore for a long time. We kept up maintenance because some Linux distributions still supported it, but now it's the time to move on. So if you're still operating on PHP 7.0, this is not supported anymore, and it is very important to make sure that you upgrade to a later version before conducting the upgrade. We recommend upgrading to at least PHP 7.2. Even better would be 7.3 because PHP 7.1 is also not supported anymore by PHP themselves and will also be removed in a later version of ownCloud Server. Also, we're working on supporting PHP 7.4 in one of the next ownCloud Server releases. So with that, I would like to jump into the new shiny features that version 10.4 delivers. And the first feature I want to introduce is the expiration date for user and group shares. This is actually for those who are familiar with ownCloud, nothing really new because we already have this feature in public links. So this is about giving users more control over access to resources when they're sharing by controlling the lifetime of user and group shares due to setting a date where a share will automatically expire. So for this, we also made some other changes to the UI. We reworked the sharing panel for that the entries can now be expanded and collapsed. We added an indicator which lets user recognize when a share is about to expire. And also, as you know it from public links, there are administrative options where an administrator can decide to set a default expiration date and also to enforce the maximum expiration date for that users can, for example, only share for 1 week and afterwards the share will automatically expire. To illustrate this a little bit better, I'm now going to share my screen and show you the comparison between what I have on the left is an ownCloud 10.3, so the previous version, and on the right I have the new version 10.4. So let me just in there as Alice and show you how that looked previously. So say, for example, I want to share this folder with my colleague Bob. Just enter that and find him. The share is created. And yeah, this is basically the usual interface which you should be familiar with. I can set the permissions here and do all sorts of things. But there's not yet an expiration date, which I will show you now on the right-hand side. So this is ownCloud 10.4. We also log in as Alice and basically do the same. I choose to share this folder with Bob, find him, and now you already should recognize the difference. So this entry here is collapsed. I don't see directly the permissions, and if I want to alter that share, I just click on that cogwheel, and now you see also the permissions as before, and we have that new field here which allows me to choose an expiration date. Say I want the 26th, and now that date is set, and the share will automatically expire. Also, even when I collapse that again, I now have this clock indicator here, which directly allows me to recognize that this share is about to expire at some point in time. So with this feature, shares will not stay forever unless a user manually removes them, but yeah, we'll have an automatic expiration for that. Yeah, users have some kind of control over access permissions. So with this, I'm going back to the presentation and over to the next feature, which we call sharing information in subfolders. So this is about making users aware about shared areas and also when they're working in shared areas to prevent accidentally sharing files or accidentally altering other users' files without knowing that they belong to someone else, or that a shared folder is actually belonging to someone else, or maybe shared publicly, things like that. So what we did here is that we asked 2 questions. That is basically, what is shared? And this question we answered by adding some overlay indicators for resources, meaning files and folders, which are shared. And the other also important question is who has access. So, and this a question we answered by also showing users who have indirect access in the sharing panel, meaning users who have been added to a parent resource or where a parent resource is shared with them will also appear in the sidebar when you're looking at files, for example, which are children resources of that. And also in that sense, users need to be able to recognize where the actual direct share resides, and for that we added a so-called via indicator. I think it makes most sense if I just show this to you again. So let me share my screen again, and we're right back. We can actually reuse the same scenario. I'm back here in ownCloud 10.3. I have shared this folder with Bob, and now when I navigate in here, this basically looks like a personal folder. There's no indication that this folder is shared with Bob, that Bob has access to this folder. For me, as Alice, this right now looks like some personal picture folder. Also here in the sharing tab, I can't recognize that someone else than me does have access to this folder or to this file. So with that, let me jump over to the new release. Same scenario, this folder is shared with Bob. And when I now navigate into this folder, I can directly recognize the answer to the first question, what is shared, by looking at those small overlay indicators, which are placed next to the file icon, basically. And now, to answer the second question, who has access, I can just click on a certain file and see here that Bob has access, but Bob doesn't have direct access, which is also why I can't alter that share. I can't remove it. I can't change the permissions here. But I see it's shared via photos, which here is the parent folder. And if I click on that indicator, I get here to the parent resource and can just make changes as usual. To maybe let you understand a little bit better how this works, I will inside here create a folder. I just call it new folder, and in that folder I also create a text file. This is new text file. Don't need content right now. And now, so I'm a little bit deeper in the hierarchy. Let me maybe also share new folder with a public link. So this is now shared. So we basically have photos shared with Bob as a user, and new folder shared via a public link. And now, if I check this file, click on that, I see that Bob has access via photos and can navigate there. And I also see that there is a public link via new folder. So basically, down the hierarchy, all the shares on parent folders will be listed here and summarized so that a user can always recognize who else has access and is informed about who he will share with when, for example, uploading a file in here, or whose file he will change when working in here. So this is basically it. So users now have a lot more options to be aware about shared areas, and this should prevent accidentally sharing files. Okay, so far on this. These were the two new shiny features which users benefit from in the UI. And now we have some smaller, more technical changes which 10.4 also introduces. So due to the deprecation of PHP 7.0, we can now move on with later database versions. So with 10.4, we can now support MariaDB up to version 10.4 and also Postgres 10. Apart from that, we can now mount external storages in a read-only mode. This means when you, for example, have, say, you provide a folder from some NFS storage to a user, which is generally in a read-only mode, so does not have permissions to change something, but only to view the contents. Then you can even in the user interface as an administrator decide to mount that in read-only mode, and the user will directly see that he can't make changes in that folder, so it will not even be possible to upload a file. That will directly say this storage is read-only, you can't make changes here. Apart from that, we also have some performance improvements in 10.4, especially regarding the OCC command, which works as a background job for the expiration of the trash bin. So regularly deleting files that users have in their trash bin. This will now have a very much reduced footprint in terms of memory consumption. And also, if you want to verify whether the checksums in the database match with the actual checksums on the storage for files, this will now have a lower memory footprint, and the checksum verification command also has some progress output on the command line now. Also, in terms of Oracle database support, we have some new features, naming connection strings, which are now supported. This is especially important if you create failover setups with Oracle databases. And the last point in this list is also interesting when you have lots of users from external user backends like LDAP. Usually, if you want to provision new users to ownCloud, which become available in LDAP, you need to do a full user sync. So you need to go through all the users which you have in LDAP to discover, say, 5 new ones. Now we additionally have an API endpoint which can be used from the external backend to tell ownCloud basically that there are 5 new users, and ownCloud will then only synchronize these 5 new users instead of having to go through the whole LDAP directory. So for installations with many users, this can also be a performance improvement. Also, ownCloud Server 10.4 takes care of some known issues that are now resolved. So one nasty one was that the folder download via archiving in the web interface didn't work on the latest macOS release. This was due to an outdated library which created tar files which were not readable or extractable on macOS Catalina. This is now fixed. Also, in user creation, and especially also for guest users, you can now also enter email addresses which contain a plus character. And for those who are using object storage, the OCC command which allows to transfer data between users, now also works in S3 multi-bucket scenarios. For public links, we made some changes. So when users upload files by using a public link and do not finish that upload, there are part files which basically prevent concurrency issues. In the past, those have not been cleaned up, so those were still residing on the storage even though they were not needed. There's now an automatic cleanup job for such scenarios. These files will now be deleted, cleaned up automatically if an upload didn't finish. Also, retention is a topic in ownCloud. So basically, the trash bin, the user's trash bin, needs to be emptied from time to time. And there are different ways of configuring it. In some scenarios, there is a threshold. Say when a user consumes more than 50% of their quota, of their storage they have available, then the trash bin will be automatically emptied. And for that scenario, the user's calculation of the quota was wrong in the past. So basically, when a user received shares, the quota or the storage usage of those received shares were calculated on top of the user's quota, even though that wasn't even their files. So that made that trash bin expiration job work in an undesired way in some scenarios, and this calculation has now been fixed with 10.4 and operates as desired again. Okay, so far this were the highlights of the 10.4 release. As I said in the beginning, the release notes contain a lot more points which I didn't mention for the short time we have. So if you want to know more, it's always worth a read. And with that, I would go over to the Q&A session. So if you have questions on what I just discussed, this is now the time to raise them. Let me check if there are some. Okay, so there is a question. One participant asks whether it is possible to enable or disable the expiration date for user and group shares feature. So it's not possible to globally disable it. So for us, it was important to be consistent with the public link expiration date feature, which can also not be enabled or disabled. But what can be configured is basically the default value for that expiration date and also the enforcement. So yeah, the admin can decide whether users can have a longer lifetime for shares than the default he set, or whether they are limited to, say, for example, a week. So I hope that answers the question. Okay. So far, I don't see more questions, so I hope everything I said was very understandable. There's another one just came in. So the question is, can I set the expiration date also in the sync client? So yeah, answer to that question, right now you can't. We're right now in the process of reworking, sharing in the desktop client. We also have some other priorities which we need to work on. So we are definitely working on making that available in the desktop client as well, of course. This is planned, but it will need some more time to catch up. Okay. So hope that answered your question. Right now, no more questions. So with that, I would close the webinar for today. And yeah, of course, I thank you all for attending, for your interest in the new server release. And I hope that all your questions have been answered, that everything was understandable, and that you enjoy the new release of ownCloud Server.